So I've had this folder in my list of projects to work on, videos that I want to do, sitting there for a while. And it was always called Taking a Stab at Intel Graphics Performance. And it's just something that I haven't been able to get to until now because of all of the other news, but also because I wanted that last little bit of info before I could do even wild guessing. But here we are, we're ready to do some wild guessing. And that stems from the fact that we finally have some leaks as to the size of these graphics cards based on execution units. We also know a bit more information recently from Intel confirming it will all be on 10 nanometer. I'm skeptical about that, but I'll get to that later in the video. But we can assume at least that that's the node they're using. And then, of course, we have some die shots of Ice Lake that we can extrapolate as well. But please keep two things in mind before I go into the analysis. Number one, those who have followed me since the beginning of this year will find this video right at home. This is plugging in the little numbers we have and extrapolating them to a best case scenario. This is not confirmation. Do not point at this and go, oh, he was wrong about this or that. We have very limited info, but what we do have is enough to make a guess. And to put things into perspective, because I think a lot of people are downplaying how good these graphics cards could be, and also just not really thinking clearly about what their place in the market will be, which brings me to point number two to keep in the back of your head the whole time. I do not suspect that Intel's overall goal will be to take the performance crown. They focus on laptop, especially with these graphics. Their integrated graphics have fallen horribly behind, and they brought in Raja Koduri to basically fix the scaling wall they hit. And there's always a point to taking the performance crown. It's always nice, but it's not their target. Their target will be to fill in the gaps where NVIDIA is still competitive in laptops, still getting those MX250s in there and those, their Max-Q like 45 watt GTX 1650s, previously 1050 Ti's, and those pesky things Intel wants to control completely to themselves. Those things their Iris graphics just couldn't quite fend off. And also, of course, to take on AMD's APUs. That's what Intel's goal is. But they can't do that unless they're able to scale it to at least double the power usage of what their target is. Because if you don't plan ahead by like a factor of 2 or 3, you'll run into scaling issues that will just basically destroy your performance. And on that note, let's do a real quick recap of that performance scaling wall Intel hit a while ago. All right. Let's fly into the history of Intel's graphics, or at least recent history. I'm not going to get into their really early stuff. All right, so they made these token integrated graphics way before Sandy Bridge, and this was, it is what it is. They basically kind of ported over their early failed desktop architecture so they could get some laptop contracts without needing to have any NVIDIA or AMD stuff in there. And I mean, as far as I can tell from researching them, this was a bit before when I paid good attention to this space, especially to the laptop space. They were horrible. I mean, I think what you could basically discern is maybe you could run like Half-Life 1 on these graphics, okay, but that's about it. These were terrible. Sandy Bridge really was the first time they got something that was impressive. Although most people shit on Sandy Bridge integrated graphics, in truth, they were actually pretty impressive for the time. I mean, you've got a 10-watt graphics card here that, as far as that could play Age of Empires 2 and 720p. I mean, Age of Empires 3, that could play Half-Life 2. All right, it could play Half-Life 2. It was fine. You're not going to play it in 1080p maxed out at 60 frames, but, maybe you're in a 720p netbook with Intel 3000 graphics. It was fine, and it was impressive. And then, just a year later, they hit you with Ivy Bridge. And the minimum requirements, I remember distinctly, for BioShock Infinite was HD 4000. This was roughly the performance of like a PS3 or 360, which meant, this was before the PS4 came out. I mean, that's pretty cool, right? you still had games that had to be built to run on these weak consoles, and this was powerful enough in ultra light laptops to play them. You could play these games. I legitimately remember recommending these for, I would say, light gaming netbooks, kind of almost like what I do now with my MX250. That's how big of a leap this was. This was a point in time where Intel was doubling graphics performance every year. And then we get to Haswell, and while it wasn't doubling, it still kept the same crazy low power usage and upped it by 50%. Again, it was, it was still outpacing desktop graphics increases in performance a little bit here. I remember I had a gaming netbook that had a GTX 650 Ti Max-Q in it, and it also, of course, had switchable graphics to these Haswell. And I remember on airplanes, I would use the switchable graphics to save energy, right? Just to turn off that NVIDIA graphics card. So, it could play on battery for a few hours. And on that airplane trip, I played Dark Souls 2 for a few hours in 720p 30 frames medium settings. So that's what this was capable of. Again, these are not something you're going to get to play the latest and greatest games, but you could kind of force most of the new AAA games to barely work on low, and that was cool. But then they also, at the same year, introduced Haswell Iris graphics. I don't remember a ton of laptops with these, to be completely honest, you guys, but they did exist, and this is when you had, again, like a 20-watt SoC that was competing with 50 to 75-watt desktop graphics. This is when you really started to see that challenge. Of course, AMD had their own stuff going on at the same time as well that were a lot cheaper and close to the same performance but used more energy. This is when APUs really were the most impressive, I think, to people, at least for how quickly they hit the scene. And this was, this is when they needed to add the Crystal Well EDRAM onto the die. But that did still allow them to double graphics performance year over year with, yes, more power usage if you want the maximum, but still there were lower clocked variants that were kind of keeping this 10 to 20 watt region. And then we got to Broadwell, and I would say, as I've told a million people, this is the last time Intel's integrated graphics got impressive. I mean, I remember the i7-5775C reviews coming out, and they were just blowing away AMD's APUs with this. So these, again, incredibly expensive to manufacture. But this is when you got almost to not like entry level, but like low mid-range, like your 650 Ti's, depending on the model. You were playing games in 1080p on an APU. 1080p, medium to low settings, but 1080p. That was impressive as hell, guys. And so the stage was set where everyone basically expected this again. Maybe it'd get more expensive. Maybe it'd use a little more energy. Like people were kind of expecting, they're going to get up to 25 watts for just the graphics. We're going to get to about 55, 65 watt laptops now. But you know what? We expected their APU to double again, which meant we kind of expected them to hit like 750 Ti performance in that type of package. Or, I guess back then would have been like a 660. Nope. They added 50% more execution units, I believe, or let me do the math there in my head, right? Let's see. Yeah. So 50% more execution units, even more. There were some massive EDRAM packages. And I don't know. I've seen some reviews where it's more than 20%, but I saw some games where it was like 10%. I mean, that type of increase in die size, more power usage, and you only get a tiny bit more performance, it was a letdown. That's when you saw them just stagnate. That's when you've seen the same rebrands of the same old stuff over and over and over. And so for the comparison I'm about to show you, I basically assume scaling of this because this is the last time their efficiency actually scaled in a meaningful way. And if you simply go to Tech Power Up, you can see a comparison here where I kind of can just scroll down from the GTX 650, which is what the Broadwell Iris graphics were, and I can extrapolate it to, based on execution units, what I expect the die size effect to be, and kind of the what I expect the clock speed scaling to be in conjunction with the node they're using. There we go. Stumbled around a little bit there. So if we go back here, and I have extrapolated it. And again, guys, this isn't a 100%, this is based on leaks that just came out, but this is not confirmed. However, this is kind of one of those better case scenarios. So let's look at what I think Intel's doing here. And I have a link in the description to where someone did a die size analysis of Ice Lake. So take a look at that. That's where a lot of these numbers come from. And at face value, this doesn't seem that impressive, I think, to a lot of people. It's like, I think, again, they're going to have, just like now with their processors, substantially more efficient versions on laptops, and then, half the efficiency, terrible yields for desktop. But it's still going to be cool. I know, 50 watts, that's not that low. 1050 Ti, that's not that great. But this is the same die size roughly as an MX250. Roughly the same die size as a GT 1030, people. And it will use less energy than the 1650 and the 1050 Ti. And I do think they won't overcharge for this. I do think they will charge probably about $120, less than $150. And they'll say, hey, double the efficiency of what NVIDIA and AMD are giving you for the same performance. We're the new kids on the block, but you cannot beat our efficiency. And on laptop, I do believe this will just massacre all of NVIDIA's low-end graphics cards. I mean, really think about this performance, being able to fit being able to sneak this into like my existing NV13 laptop and have over double the performance of what NVIDIA or AMD can give you right now. That's what I think is the best case scenario and what I think Intel's really going for. And I do think they'll be able to do it on 10 nanometer. At least with this die here, I do think they'll be able to do it because this is a tiny die size. This is small enough that they'll have versions of this integrated into a quad core. And they'll also split a lot of these off and make them their own dies. In fact, that's probably what they'll do with most of them, right? Just so they can split up, so they can glue them together like what AMD is doing. Yeah, this is what Intel's seeking to really target as the big splash they make with their graphics. But of course, they need to scale it up higher. It'd be stupid for them not to. Still, this will not be the 256 execution units. This will not be integrated into any CPUs, I don't think. I guess it could be, but this is big enough where with 10 nanometers horrible yields, I think this is going to be its own die. But this is about the size of what the quad core plus integrated will be at the time, so they'll get away with this. And this will be the thing that will replace those Vega M APUs, those Kaby Lake plus Vega M SoCs. These are going to be your 45-watt graphics that they integrate on one, SoC with their Ice Lake quad cores again, it blows everything away. I know there's 660 Ti Max Qs, but those are going to be weaker than this. This is going to target being, not worlds more efficient. Like right here, this is crazy more efficient. But this will target notably more efficient than the competition, able to fit into the 16-inch laptops. And on desktop, you're going to get, something 30% more efficient than their counterparts. These are your $150, $180 Intel graphics cards that blow away the competition in efficiency. Not as much as these ones will, but will blow them away. And then we move on to the high end, right, in quotation marks. I don't think Intel is going to go for the top end. Keep in mind, by this point, the 5750 XT could be out. NVIDIA may have price dropped this. So, and remember, the 2080S is not NVIDIA's top graphics card. The 2080 Ti is, and that die would normally be $600 or something. So just keep that in mind when you look at this, that by the time this version, the high-end Intel Z graphics come out, AMD and NVIDIA may be on the next generation. And I really almost said this was going to be on 14 nanometer, but when I did the math, I just thought the die size would be too big, frankly, and it'd use too much energy. So I don't know. I'm not entirely sure if this will be on 10 nanometer, but you know what? Intel says it will. So I'll just assume that, and I'll assume they'll have some incredibly cut-down versions of this. And based on what I've looked at, I really don't think this is going to be that much more efficient than what AMD and NVIDIA are making. But they'll have scaled it up. they'll have proved they can scale their graphics up to the same level as AMD and NVIDIA. And I'm not sure what they'll charge, but I think this is your $400. This is them barely in the high end, and that's what they'll say. First generation, we have the most efficient graphics cards, and we've proven we can scale it up even with our terrible 10 nanometer all the way up to their high end. Barely in the high end. By them, there might even be a new generation from NVIDIA and AMD. But you know what? That's what this isn't their target. They just need to get here, and then they'll work on refining this, die shrinking it to 7 nanometer the next year, and trying to move it into this tier. Also, this isn't a typo. I think 5750 XT will be out in about a year. That will be their RX 580 refresh, right? Okay, so that was a lot of talking. Let's wrap things up here. So in conclusion, we have a leak saying up to 512 execution units, but we also know that they have a 256 die and a 128 die, and that the low-powered integrated Ice Lake versions will have a 64 execution unit die. What does that mean? They're targeting the 64 and 128 to be most efficient for sure, mostly because they have to. 10 nanometer, when clocked low enough, is very efficient. I suspect it will be. Well, again, we'll have to see. Never bet on Intel right now. But I think it probably will actually turn out okay for these laptop chips. And at those levels, I think Intel will be able to demonstrate once again, like they did with Ivy Bridge, like they did with Haswell and Broadwell, world-leading graphics efficiency, and now with good driver support. Again, 80 millimeter squared. That's tiny. That can just be right away. And I mean, that die size analysis should really tell you that's definitely what they're doing, by the way. The fact that it lines up so closely with the MX150 and 250 from NVIDIA, I mean, come on. Intel's definitely looking at all these laptops that HP has, that Dell has, that Huawei has. We want to get in there, and we're going to deliver something that uses 10 to 25 watts, and guess what? It's going to offer 2 to 4 times the performance. That's going to be awesome. From there, I don't expect it to scale as well, both because I just don't think that's their target performance, but also because 10 nanometer just kind of sucks, and until they get to 7 nanometer, they're just never, I don't think, going to be able to scale it up to giant die sizes. But still, I expect mid-range cards in the $150 to $300 price bracket that come to trade blows with your 1660 Ti's, your 2060s, your 5600 XTs from AMD, while using 20-30% less energy. I do think Intel could potentially do that. And then just to prove a point, they will scale it up to 512. And also because there are laptops where they say, well, maybe this will use 200 watts on desktop, but we're going to make those 100 watt chips that will just at least be able to be offered for better prices if you buy an i7 with it to laptop makers. This is going to be a good bundle. This is going to allow Intel to continue to dominate laptops, I think, until at least Zen 3 comes out. And there will be this narrow amount of time, I believe, next year where Intel's going to have awesome, efficient desktop chips. And I guess in addition to that, I'll just say, yep, it could turn out badly. None of this is confirmed. But at the same time, they're a big company that's pulled off some amazing things. Don't count out Intel, guys. They got Raja working there. It could be very exciting. And hopefully they're good enough to fend off those ARM graphics cards that are coming out too, by the way. So I hope you liked this video. If you've been watching my videos, please subscribe. If you've been watching a bunch, please ring the bell button. And please share and like. It really does help. And additionally, a quick update to my channel here. It continues to grow very fast, and due to popular demand, I will be adding new Patreon tiers with features soon. I put a lot of thought into it to make it so it's not just stupid. I will add that producer level tier, and I will likely add a tier above that that's really special for those who want to really support the channel. And part of that will be merch. You guys are begging me for it lately. I kind of thought of merch as stupid before, but I think I've thought of ways to have some really cool products that won't take too much time away from me making these videos for you. So look out for that. I will, of course, announce it when you can buy that. If you like how goofy my thumbnails are, just imagine the kind of products that I will brand and sell. There's going to be some funny stuff. I'm really... Yeah, there's a coffee cup. I'm really proud of what I thought of for that one. And additionally, I am working on trying to get that website up. That should be coming soon. I also have giant announcements for travel, where I will be going to events. And I have an audio engineer coming on board who should allow me to hopefully release a podcast at least every other week, most likely every week, and the quality should go up. So continue to support me, and I will continue to deliver. Thank you.